story. We pick little verses to kind of highlight. But we're going to review the story. That's the whole sermon, is review the story. And if it's just a story, okay, you're welcome to ignore the broad message of God. But if you do happen to relate to any of the characters, I hope it's Esther, if you do happen to relate to any of these situations and want to stand up to a life of courage, well, I hope you're standing up, as Esther did, to the marriage of violence and power and hatred and fear. So ready, first, this is where it started. As a fat, lazy king is married to a woman who is getting old and frumpy. Or maybe she's just getting bashful or moral. We don't know exactly. But she refuses to strip for the king and his drunk friends. So Vashti's out. He tried to move on her. He failed. Usually when you're a king, you just start kissing them and they'll let you. You can do anything. You can grab them by the whatever. But she said no, so Vashti is out. So they have a beauty contest. And the king picks a younger, prettier version, a model named Esther, who we have to presume is just fine taking her clothes off. And he's fine with her taking her clothes off. And the court is fine with both of them being fine with her taking her clothes off. It always works that way, even though I'm sure you know, in the streets, the supporters were yelling about other women who had the audacity to do anything of their own, because sex is bad, and family values, and what would God think? None of them which applies to her, or the king, or them, because you dance with who brung you, and hypocrisy is human nature. Is it just a story, or is this God's eternal message, even for us, even for today, even for you and your call? That was step one. Step two, second, same people who support this king. It's easy to start with the language. It's easy to let the feelings bubble up. Oh, finally someone is saying what we've all been thinking. And it's easy to justify the stigma. Anything from a foreign country, anything of a different religion, anything different at all. It's kind of disgusting, but this administration's chief of staff seizes on these racist identity politics. This administration, King Ahasuerus, his chief of staff, don't get confused, we're talking about just the story or God's message for any time, for any of us. So Haman starts making plans from what to say to what to do with anyone different. And he gets the king drunk, which I think is the Bible way to say play golf. And then he gives him a bunch of silver, which is the Bible way to say I give you a bunch of silver. And then they pass some laws so that those people don't have as many rights. Let's make some laws so that they have to live in fear. Let's build some, cages to round him up and some gallows to hang him on because we're in charge and they're different. And we'll talk about safety, we'll talk about patriotism, we'll talk about law and order. But cruelty is the point. Except third, here's the problem. There's a thorn in the plan. Esther, the new queen, Nobody knows her secret. She's actually a foreigner of sorts. She's secretly a Jew living in Persia, which had taken over Jewish lands, and then they disdained all the people who used to live there. Just a story or God's eternal message. It never really mattered, but if Haman's, it never really mattered before, but if Haman's plan goes forward, she would be dragged to those same gallows, and she would be slipped into the noose and fall those 60 feet. But she would far not be the only one. And if Haman gets his ways, if the king lets it go on, so many people will suffer. And they will suffer needlessly. And they will suffer out of nothing but the hatred of a prideful and pathetic little man whose name Haman. Does anyone know ancient Persian? Anybody? No. The word Haman in Persian means illustrious and magnificent. So Haman wanted to kill the Jews. He wanted to let terror reign. He wanted to make Persia Haman again. And if he gets his way, it will have gone from language and feelings, go back to where you're from, to pure genocide. The very slippery slope that shows up in our world so often. The very slippery slope that at every point is as far from God's will as you can be. So forth. In the face of that pure evil, God calls someone. Someone who had no experience calling out lies. Someone with no background in fighting anything, much less fighting for life or honor or faith or hope. But God calls her for such a time as this. God does not call the most capable. God makes capable the one who is called. Just a story or our eternal message. Now fifth, if anyone had known what Esther was going to do, how she was going to manipulate the king and make different laws and trick the chief of staff and break apart the whole plot, don't you know that if she had put it out there and made speeches and started a campaign against those policies, people would have said to Esther, oh, don't get involved in politics. You're just a girl. It's impolite to mix religion and politics. Besides, can't we agree to disagree? I mean, isn't that what we're supposed to do? Be united, agree to disagree? And your media is not telling you the truth about Haman. Maybe you're the racist instead of Haman. You're the one who's against the Persians. And if that had been her strategy, some people would have taken sides with the king, and they would have thought the whole thing was just a witch hunt and sent her to death threats and put billboards about killing her and sending more gallows to protect them from other gallows, and other people would have stayed out of it because this fight doesn't concern them and both sides are at fault and policies don't matter. If I'm in trouble, blah, 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 sin, sin, sin. But Esther isn't concerned with policies. She isn't contained by politics. So 6, God told Esther she was called to save her people. Called at such a time as this to stand up to oppression, born to be a savior. The world says if you bring up religion and politics with family and friends, or dear God, don't bring up that at church, well, that's just too awkward. We can't be awkward. But Esther says, no, I think I'm going to get involved. I'm going to use my voice because God gave me a voice. I know a thing or two about being judged, so I'm going to stand up to that. And no, we can't agree to disagree when life is on the line. And I'm sure she would have heard it all. Haman's not really like that. Haman's not really like that. But tell him
about oppression.
It is about oppression, yes.
That's what they are, is the oppressing force upon our own selves of
an oppressing force on our own self. And it's either just a story, or it's God's.
We are the politics. They are the oppressors.
Politics comes from the same word as polite, and sometimes polite becomes our idol. But polite comes from the word city, polis. And politics is about how do we work together as a city, as a people, as a citadel of Susan, where people were in danger of their lives. So Esther says, you know, I listen to Haman. I have dinner with him. I get drunk with the king. I know exactly what he's like. I don't have to listen to journalists tell me and spin it for me. Just listen to the evil that comes out of their mouth. Listen to their supporters get more violent, their excuses get more outlandish, their hearts further and further from God's own will. So 7, Esther uses her assets, as it were, and manipulates the king, and tricks the chief of staff, and saves the Jews, and you heard what happened to Haman. He was hung on the very gallows that he built. Now maybe God forgave Haman. Do you think God forgave Haman?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, probably so. And certainly we should all strive to be more forgiving. God knows I need to learn how to make peace with the Hamans of the world while fighting against their actions and their evil ideologies. But while the gallows still stand there threatening so many lives, while the oppressive laws are still being written, while the campaign of hate is still being waged, it's really hard not to feel like Haman got what he deserved. You can pray for me on that. I hope God forgives. 8, ever since she stood up for her people by standing up against evil, the Hebrew people celebrated Esther. They even have a holiday where they eat cookies called Haman Tashin, which are little triangles with little goodies, fruit goodies in there. Has anyone ever had a Haman Tashin? Yeah, they can be good. You know what they mean? Tashin is Yiddish for pockets. And so what this is, it's about always go back to Haman's pockets. Follow the money. Because it started out with a lot of silver so we can pass these laws. Just a story or God's eternal message. So 9. When you find ill-gotten wealth, insatiable greed, a lack of human decency, complacency in the face of abuse, when you find an embrace of violent and virulent sexism and racism, when you find the Hamans of this world, God calls you to resist. God calls you. God calls for courage, to use the voice you were given, to stand with the strong feet you were given, to burn with the compassion you were given. God points out that you were born to spread love, which sometimes means you're born to stop hate, which is not just a story. That is God's eternal message. Now, Jesus followed in Esther's footsteps. Let us not forget why he died. He might have risen on Easter to show that all things can be redeemed. Salvation is for all. New life is upon us. But he died standing up to a marriage of corrupt, immoral politics and hypocritical, empty religion. And on the last night of his life, before he would be dragged away and beaten, before they would make an example of him, before the Roman centurion had a chance to think, wait a minute, he has a point. Before any of that, he spent his last night with his best friend. with his best friends, he took the bread and he said, oh man, life gets so broken. It gets so broken. And I want you to know that you're not alone with your brokenness. I am broken with you. All are broken. God is broken. God steps into the brokenness to be healed with you. And Jesus took a cup and said, we are sold so often these ideas that we have to be good enough, earn our love from God, follow everything just right. And Jesus says, I got a new deal for you, a new covenant, a new promise. It's called grace. Grace always wins. Mercy always wins. Love always wins.
God is love.
God is love. And so people will come from east and west and north and south. They'll come up to the hill of God, to the table of God. Not the church's table. There are no boundaries here. Anyone who wants peace in their life, anyone who wants love in their life, anyone who searches for something better for themselves and for the world, you are invited to come and remember that love always wins. I'd invite my servers to come forward.